Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
We have such a fun show for you today. You know the Wanamaker dilemma where half my advertising is wasted trouble is I just don't know which half? Well, we have Ethan Decker on today talking about why the same is true for advertising, why half the ideas we have about advertising are wrong. And more importantly, we talk about some really practical ways to fix that.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Marc Binkley and Vasilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Ethan Decker. Ethan, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Really excited to be here right now, Mark.
Yeah, V and I have been talking about this a lot, and it's nice to find a kindred spirit on this side of the pond who knows a couple of things about what we're going to talk about today. So you're the founder and president of Applied Brand Science. I stumbled across you because tons of great content you have online, and it seems like whenever I'm looking for something, there's a visual that you guys have done, which is super handy. So you guys are a consulting firm that uses the latest marketing science to help brands grow. Formerly an insights and strategy leader at agencies like 72 and Sunny, Integer, Crispin, Porter, and Bogosky. So you've been in marketing, you've been in agency, you're familiar with all like the way things were. And now we're kind of at this crossroads where there's like this emerging field of evidence-based marketing that we're really excited to talk to you about today. And so one of the things that I find fascinating is the Wanamaker dilemma that most people know is that half of my advertising is wasted trouble is I just don't know which half. Has been around literally for over 100 years. And it seems like we haven't made that much progress towards answering that question for a long time. And so today we want to kind of dig into that because you put up a great post that was a version of that, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But there's this difference, I think, between data-driven decision-making and evidence-based decision-making, which we're going to kind of just peel back the layers on. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about these things.
Yeah. So let's start with that because you had this post that was great. Half the ideas about advertising are wrong. Trouble is we just don't know which half. So
I love this one so much.
Yeah, it's so great. Maybe if we could just start there. Let's open up a can of worms. What are some of the ideas that we've got wrong?
Well, let me count the ways.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard because science is hard. And we often forget that, especially people outside of science. I have a background in science. And so when I got into advertising and found out that there were so many squishy, mushy, trendy ideas, and I kept saying, well, what are the laws? What's the science of this? Is there any research or science behind this? I kept getting either blank stares or people saying, oh, that's not advertising. You can't do science in advertising. Mm-hmm. And so while I was doing my marketing and advertising, I dug into the actual research that I could find. A lot of it's buried in academic journals. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, I speak academicese, or however you pronounce that now.
Academicese. I love that.
And found out that there is something there. There is science of how brands grow, how brands compete, how shoppers shop, how ads work. Mm-hmm. And some of it does fly in the face of some very closely and dearly held ideas that many practicing marketers have.
Mm-hmm. So, like, what is there any specific ones that come to mind?
Sure. One of the classics is that you grow via increasing brand loyalty.
Yep.
And
which is true, right? Everybody knows that.
Everybody says that. Everybody believes that. Everybody hears that. Brand loyalty, brand loyalty, brand loyalty. It is the drumbeat of the industry, if not most of business. And it's been supported in so many different ways. One of the pieces of evidence for it was a particular article from, I think, 1990 in Harvard Business Review that talked about how you grow via loyalty, via acquiring new people. The cost of acquiring a customer is 20 times more than the the cost of retaining a customer, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out that the evidence suggests otherwise. The evidence actually suggests that mostly how you grow is through acquiring new customers. And that ultimately, the thing that really differentiates big brands, high market share brands, and often more profitable brands from smaller ones is how many customers they have, not how loyal those customers are.
Mm-hmm.
A great example is Coca-Cola. We would all think Coke is a big, classic, strong, healthy brand. And we always talk about the diehard Coke loyalist who would never put lip to a Pepsi can.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And yet, when you look at the actual data, what is it? 70 or 80% of people that drink Coke also drink Pepsi and vice versa. And oh, by the way, they also drink a lot of other types of sodas, much less other types of beverages. So the fact that we've thought for decades, for generations, that loyalty is the path to growth, and it actually isn't, is one of those kind of needle scratch moments when you realize maybe we need to really look at the evidence instead of just believe what feels right.
So why do you think that is, that there's so much of this in our discipline that maybe as marketers, we just naturally just take some of it for face value and we just regurgitate it? Because that example is like it costs more to acquire a new customer than it is to, nurture one that's already, been through your ecosystem. Why do we just take that and not actually do our due diligence? Do you think it's just a way of working, thinking, that we just don't apply that? What did you call it? Academiology. Academic. That's it. Academic keys. It just feels weird. Like we're not actually crossing our T's and dotting our I's enough.
I think it's two things. One of them is as simple as human nature. It's hard to do science. It's hard to control for 30 different variables. It's hard to tease out cause and effect. And it's a lot easier just to believe some confident person from Harvard and go with what they say is right. And so that's one of the big pieces. I think the other piece is, business is a challenge. Business is demanding and business moves quickly. So a lot of people don't have the time to slow down and do the science to test these things because they're too busy trying to keep the lights on.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Even things like, I don't know if this is one of the ones you've, the half of the wrong ideas, but there's that concept of, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And so we have been using the funnel for so long, since 1898, that it has just become second nature. And I always talk to V about this, is like, it's almost like the invisible hand of our decision-making. We don't even know that it's forcing our decisions, but it is there. And so we all agree to it. And so of course it must be right. But of course there's no funnel. Like there is no funnel in front of a customer at any point in time. So like, do you think, like, is there just a lot of those kinds of things, like the way you mentioned it, V, the ways of working, that we just don't even stop to think? They're so permanent or permeated in traditional businesses that they're shorthand. We just do those things, and that's why we just do those things, because they're just there.
Absolutely. Interestingly, it's similar to how we actually shop or buy things. For instance, I would wager cash money in whatever currency you choose, except Bitcoin, of course, that neither of you,
dollar.
that neither of you assessed the drivetrain, the electrical system, and the safety system of the last car you bought.
Yep, true. Yeah, I never looked at any of those things.
Well, I didn't either.
Yeah,
because we don't. It's too hard. It's a pain in the ass. And so we do shortcuts. We find ways to take hard questions and substitute them with easier questions so that we can get on with our life. And it's the same in marketing, even though we're maybe wearing casual business attire or business casual attire. Mm-hmm. I guess that's a north-south hemisphere thing there, casual business versus business casual.
Business casual.
But it's the same in business. It's easier just to hear something that sounds right and familiar and go with it than it is to really do the diligence to look under the hood and figure it out. I mean, another great one is the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
80% of your money comes from 20% of your customers. And it's kind of true, but what we love about it is that it adds up to 100, and that feels good. And then you don't have to really wonder, because no one would remember the 65-12 rule.
Yeah.
Right? What the hell's a 65-12 rule? But the 80-20 rule, it feels good. It rolls off your tongue. You can remember it, and you can share it at your next team meeting or your team offsite.
Yeah.
And it steers you a little bit in the right direction, because often it is kind of true that a few of your customers account for a lot of your revenue. But 80-20, it's good enough. It's good enough.
It's a great book, because it's essentially what it's saying is that the few make up the most. Now, the percentages are going to vary, obviously, by every industry, potentially company and whatnot. But you're right. The 100 sounds amazing, easy to remember. It makes you sound smart, too.
Yeah.
I've used that line myself.
Yeah. There's another one, too, I saw of one of your posts. It's great. Time spent thinking about your brand is this bar chart. And it's like massive. You. Non-existent, your customers.
Yeah, that's a huge fallacy in the world of marketing. Once you cross that threshold and work for a brand or work for a company or become a marketer that actively thinks about brands and ads and features and benefits, you think everyone else thinks as much as you do about it.
Yeah.
And that they know as much as you know about it. And it's so hard to remember that most people, they don't think about your brand on a daily basis, even if they use it on a daily basis. They might not even know what brand they use. I regularly do workshops, and I'll make them very interactive, and I ask people about their own behaviors because it's universal. I'll say, how many of you know what brand of toilet paper you use? And regularly there are people who don't know what brand of toilet paper they use. And that's something that should be near and dear to your, heart, if not your butt.
Your butt.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you become a marketer, all you can think about is toilet paper and the plies and the quilting and the how many square meters per sheet and how many mega rolls and jumbo rolls and what Pantone color of blue, right? All these things. And you very quickly forget most people can't find their car keys, and they're more worried about the next doctor's appointment than they are about what brand of toilet paper they use to wipe their butt. So you have to, there's a new phrase I'm starting to use more often, which is first you have to overthink it. You have to get smart on a topic. You have to get way deep into it. You have to think more intently about toilet paper than anyone ever has. And then you have to underthink it. Mm-hmm. Because you have to remember, again, most people can't find their keys, and they care more about their next doctor's appointment than they do about the brand of toilet paper they're using.
Yeah.
Mark, if you remember, it was Roger Martin that would tell us like the brain searches for shortcuts from when you're thinking about like a branding perspective, right? So your ability, and I love this idea of like underthink it, make it simple. How can people make it memorable? So then from a mental availability perspective, or when you're prompted as a consumer, your mind just knows exactly what that shortcut is. So if it's toilet paper in this case, you're just shopping Costco or one of these other ones, you don't really care what you're putting on your butt. But at the end of the day, it's like, how do you reduce that friction so consumers don't overthink it? Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of science there too, to say like I'm trying to remember one of our other guests talking about like branding between the ears, like the psychology behind it as well, which is again reducing that friction, making it as simple as possible, where you're not having them make too many decisions in that moment.
There's another one that, that's a good point, V. There's another one that comes up too, and I wrote a post about this using one of your diagrams. The do generations exist? It's one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, we're going to segment, and then we're going to build out personas, and it's going to be like Millennial Mike and Super Sally, who both work together in IT, and there's they like their lattes in the morning, and I don't know, they shop at Lululemon, stuff like that. And then maybe if you could just describe some of the findings from your post there.
Yeah, this is the question we've had for the past 20 or 30 years about generational regularities or generational differences, and how are millennials different than boomers, and who should we target, and do millennials shop based on their values, whereas boomers, I guess, shop because they're hedonists.
Right.
But it turns out that there is usually more differentiation within a generation than between them. Granted, it absolutely depends upon the topic you're studying. So, for instance, Financial Times readers, the people who read the Financial Times, they have an incredibly high cohesion score. They're all the same. They're very similar in that way. Whereas people who floss are much more diverse. And yet we're trying to come up with some generality, some regularity about everybody who ever uses floss. And then below people who floss, you see the generations. So millennials are less coherent as a group than people who floss. And boomers, Gen X, and Gen Z are even less coherent than them. So when you really do think about it, there are some very, very large trends that are generational, or at least change over time. For instance, the actual baby boom, that was about reproduction. That's a massive cultural factor. Now there's a massive generational shift when it comes to technology and using cell phones that we're seeing. It's not a step function. It's kind of a gradual function, but it does change things significantly over time. However, when you look at young people, it's still really, really hard to come up with things that are universal about all Gen Z. And in fact, we're learning more and more. It's pretty dumb to try and do that. And when you do try and make those stereotypes, just like you were saying about, the Gen Xers, or not Gen Xers, let's not talk about them. They're feral. The millennials who all like to shop at Lululemon and drink lattes and buy Allbirds, it takes you down a very dangerous path of stereotyping your target audience. And usually that means eliminating and omitting people who feel different than the stereotype you've created.
And so, and indirectly, you end up shrinking your potential buying audience.
Yeah.
Because if you follow through on that segmentation, then you end up eliminating people, because you may still serve them ads, but you aren't connecting with them because you've got a totally different target person in your ad.
Right. You're missing out on all the people that buy Champion or C9 or whatever it's now called at Target, as opposed to the people who buy Lululemon.
Yeah. So why do you think there is that fixation though, of like that over segmentation, of over trying to, create those personas? Is it because as marketers, we want to make sure that we can tell the story that we found that niche audience, or that real audience that can help us drive more conversions at the end of the day? But why do we invest so many dollars in that space when in actuality, it's like, maybe we're overthinking it.
Yeah, V, I think this goes back to the earlier question about the things we were all raised with in marketing and advertising, the founding beliefs that we tend to have. And one of them is we need a sharp target audience that's different than our competitors, that we can win with. And there is a long-standing belief that my buyers are different than your buyers, that Nike people are different than Adidas people, Apple people are different than Mac people. And of course, Coke people, they are so different than Pepsi people. Coke people are all about family and tradition. And Pepsi people are all young and hip and about the now and fun. And there have been, again, generations of marketers who talk about this, believe this, and work as if these are just given truths. And when you look at the evidence and I'm saying lots and lots of evidence over multiple different brands, many different categories, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of different observations, different countries, different time periods, the patterns that you start to see, the descriptions, not even what should happen, but what does happen, is you see that actually Coke and Pepsi buyers look almost the same, and often they are the same people.
Mm-hmm.
That Apple and Microsoft people are not categorically different. And in fact, a lot of them own both products. That you don't have dyed-in-the-wool Apple people that have 12 Apple products, and then dyed-in-the-wool Microsoft people that don't own any.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of people that have one Apple product.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to do. Research is hard to do. Gathering the data is hard to do. Finding people or companies or organizations that can actually share the numbers just to get the right count is hard.
It occurred to me as you were saying that it's almost like ROAS in a way, which might actually be one of those other funny metrics that are half the advertising ideas that are wrong. But in a way, it's like, because you see a ROAS number, you go, oh, okay, this is great. Well, I'm getting 3x, 4x, 5x, or whatever it is, 85x on my spend on every dollar I'm putting in here. But you're not measuring the incrementality. In the similar way, when you just look at your own database, you see these heavy buyers and you think they're yours. You don't think of them as being incremental in the category because you don't even look at the category. They're just, or how their relationship is to the rest of the category, because they're probably the heavy buyers in the category, or the heavy buyers for you. And
that's another one of those exactly counterintuitive findings of the science. You're right, Mark, that your heavy buyer probably is an extremely heavy category buyer and generally will buy more of other brands than they even buy of you.
Yeah.
Whereas most of us look at a heavy buyer of ourselves and think, oh, we've got them.
Yeah.
They buy 5 jars of my mayonnaise every year. And we think, oh, we've got them. Well, no, actually, they probably buy 15 jars of mayonnaise every year. 5 of them are you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's counterintuitive.
Yeah. But we label it like with loyalty, the term loyalty. And so we think what that means is monogamous to us.
Yep. Loyalty. Don't get me started, because I hate the term loyalty.
Yeah.
I hate it. I think it's full of too many ideas and concepts mashed up and mixed up together. It's full of all this emotional baggage as well. Mm-hmm. And then we start to fantasize about what the loyalist looks like, right? Who's the mayonnaise loyalist? Who's the Apple loyalist?
Yeah.
And it's a terrible term. There's so many better terms than it. I think it should be retired. It's a zombie concept.
Yeah. It could, I mean, it's the same is true for B2B SaaS even, I'm sure. Where you have somebody's a subscription and you think they're loyal, but they're just like, it's too much of a pain in the ass to switch.
Right. Or else procurement comes in and says, well, someone else found it for less, so we're going with them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy with that, though? Like Mark and I just late last year, we finished up our MBAs, and in the marketing classes, like loyalty still being taught as the thing you're striving for from a Dodge perspective, generating that loyalty. And I think I can speak for Mark here. Like we agree with you 100% that is still the wrong lens to be looking at things. But the fact that it's still being taught and it's still, it's permeated a lot of the, the executive level suites and whatnot as being like the priority. How do we start changing that narrative though? And doing it in a way where we can actually substantiate and look at it and show that business value wise, that here's another opportunity for us to look for, and let's not label everything loyalty, because you're right. I think it's become this melting pot of different tactics, different ideas to create that repeat purchase. And we're labeling it, say, loyalty, when in actuality, you need toilet paper every month. Like that's not changing.
Depending on how big your family is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations, both of you, on getting your MBAs. That's great.
Oh yeah, thanks. We're so glad that it's over.
That's great. So getting to the question of how to change people's belief about loyalty, it's going to take time. It's going to take some visceral experiences that people have. personal, visceral experiences. And that's what I focus on in my training, is to give people that visceral, personal understanding of how different their beliefs are from the facts, from the truth. It's not quite as drastic as the Matrix, but it's close for some of these concepts.
It kind of
because
is,
they're
though,
so
right?
deeply held.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, if you think about it, we've had 50 or 60 years of fighting against fat in our foods. Low fat, no fat. We got rid of butter because it was too fatty. Then we started talking about hydrogenated fats, and we started talking about, I don't know, all the other types of fats and versus the good fats and the bad fats. And look at all the low fat, no fat foods in the world. And yet obesity is on the rise.
Yeah.
The data suggest that, in fact, sugar, which is calories and carbohydrates, is really the culprit and has been from the get-go. And in fact, the sugar industry basically said, look over there, fat. It's not us. Look over there. Look at them. It's called fat. Look. And for 60 years, we've had an enormous industry of low fat and no fat foods and trans fats and whatever else they are. And we're still undoing that. And this is, if not just countries, it's the entire world. So similarly, we have this ethos in marketing that loyalty is the thing. And it's gone on for years and decades. Now, this is not to say that there aren't sub-elements of loyalty, which are absolutely real and true, like repeat purchase, like customer retention, like habit, like brand affinity, affection, or love. All of these things can matter, absolutely. But this big, broad concept that the way to have a successful brand is to create loyal customers definitely requires some dissection.
Yeah. Okay. So, and the people often doing the dissection, I would say, are some of the most in-demand people in the marketing world. So data scientists and data-driven, almost every job description I've seen is data-driven decision-making is mandatory. And so you have this need to prove the effectiveness of marketing. Analytics and insights is always one of the top skills for anybody. You've got this huge group of people that are growing in their skill set. What's happening? It seems like they're feeding all this information. They're getting all this data. Data's everywhere. We have all these new people with these skill sets about data science who can do R and Python and programming language and all that kind of stuff. And yet we're still here talking about loyalty, and that it's 5 times or 25 times or 105 times more expensive to acquire a customer than to keep a customer.
Yeah, that's a gap. And data science isn't the same thing as science, let's say.
Yeah.
In the sense that if you're doing data science, often your job is to find all the little details that help your brand make more money, and all the little eccentricities and differences about your brand and about each customer group, each segment, and maybe even each individual customer, right down to, Mark, what kind of toilet paper do you prefer versus V? What kind of toilet paper do you prefer? And parsing that out and analyzing that data, and then coming up with customized ways to target, Marc type people and V type people. And so the focus is often on short term, on correlation, on what I would call mining for meaning, where you get reams and reams of data, terabytes or petabytes of data, and you just look for correlations. What made Marc buy more toilet paper? Oh, well, he had more mayonnaise. Well, then let's make sure he eats more mayonnaise, and let's find copycats like Marc of people who eat a lot of mayonnaise, and they'll hopefully buy a lot of toilet paper too.
I do love mayonnaise. Yeah.
Well, and the connection to toilet paper is quite an interesting story.
It's really
high. But data science is often that realm of looking at your brand and your brand only, or you and a couple competitors, trying to look for correlations and particulars and idiosyncrasies. Marketing science is really looking for universals. It's looking to describe what are the general patterns, what are the universal or broad trends and habits and fundamental consistent empirical patterns we can see in the world. And that requires data across companies. It requires data across time and across countries. And most data scientists are not equipped with that data or not asked to look at that kind of information.
Fair. Yeah.
It's not to say it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
For instance, Bain and Co., they did a fantastic bunch of research with shopper panels across multiple countries and many, many years and hundreds of brands, where they really looked at things like household penetration versus repeat purchase versus market share, and tried to say, well, what are the fundamental patterns across these things? And one of the findings coming out of that was, in country after country, category after category, penetration was 5 to 15 times more important for brand growth than repeat purchase was. So if you really wanted to grow, then you would try and increase your household penetration and acquire new customers. 5 to 15 times more powerful.
Yeah, that's
so that's good research. That's real good marketing science, but that's not the kind of thing that most companies engage in.
Yeah, that's fair. And you're right. Probably some of it is because when you think about the data that companies have, it's their own data. They're not looking across the category and across countries to see what the patterns of behavior of shopping is. It's just within their own subset.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting about that too is there is a fair bit of marketing science you can apply to your own data if you know how to look at it. For instance, many of my clients have never done a basic frequency distribution of their buyers, which is to say, how many buyers do they have who've bought them once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, etc. You can also break it up by how many dollars people spend on you, $1, $5, $10, etc. So you can change the metric, but a basic frequency distribution of your buyers is something you can do on your own data if you have that data at hand, which is how many individuals bought you how many times. So there is stuff you can do, but you have to know how to look at it, which means you should know some of the fundamental laws of brand science.
Yeah. So why don't we just get into that? There are several brand laws. Some of them are really popular. The distribution of purchase patterns is one of the things. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe if you can describe some of the most popular brand laws that exist.
Popular is a funny word to use with brand laws.
I
would say,
like, what's the Taylor Swift of the brand laws?
The Taylor Swift. There is no such thing.
Okay,
no,
fair enough.
It's still an unknown band working it at the Applebee's in Des Moines right now.
Okay. What's the Mazzy Star of the
right. Brand laws? What I'll say is if there are well-known brand laws, and I don't think there are, I think 90 to 95% of most practicing marketers and business owners and entrepreneurs don't know these. They're just not known. But one of them, if they've heard of some of these brand laws, might be called the law of double jeopardy.
Okay.
Double jeopardy says that small brands are punished twice compared to big brands. They have fewer buyers, and those buyers buy them less often.
Yep.
So small brands have lower penetration, and they have lower repeat purchase, aka loyalty. Sorry. Just threw up in my mouth a little bit there.
I love it.
So double jeopardy is the term for it. There's a mathematical equation showing how true this is. There are oodles of studies showing that this shows up in category and industry after category and industry. And so it looks like a universal law that big brands have more buyers, and those buyers also tend to buy them a little more often. The repeat purchase rate's a little higher.
Mm-hmm.
And that small brands have fewer buyers who buy them less often. So double jeopardy is probably one of the best well-known of the brand laws, the Mazzy Star of the brand law world.
Not the Taylor Swift, though. Okay.
Yeah. Fair enough.
80-20 is the Taylor Swift of the brand law world.
I was going to say maybe 80-20's up there. No? Okay.
I think if we're looking at Taylor Swift sizes, we're looking at things which aren't really brand laws. We're looking at still things that are classic beliefs.
That's probably more like start with why.
Oh.
Yeah.
Or the funnel or something like that. Like that is just so ubiquitous.
Yep.
Not necessarily to say that it's right. It's just it's ubiquitous.
So another one some people might have heard of is it's called the negative binomial. It's a terrible, terrible name.
Mm-hmm.
There's a much more comfortable and approachable and friendly name, which Weimar Schneider's coined. It's called the banana curve.
Mm-hmm.
The buyer banana curve shows that for almost every brand, you've got a lot of people who buy you once, and then fewer people who buy you twice, and then fewer who buy you 3, and then 4, and then 5. And it's a sloping curve. It looks like an anti-ski jump or a long tail, you might call it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fit technically in math by something called the negative binomial. But, the bell curve has a mathematical name too, but we never talk about it because we don't talk about Bruno.
Yeah.
But the banana curve is another universal law. And most people, again, don't know it, don't know how to analyze their own data in light of it, and don't really understand what it means.
So it's like that frequency distribution one you were talking about before of your own buyers.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that.
Yeah, you could do that. You could do a frequency distribution and look, and lo and behold, again, I'll bet cash money of any currency besides Dogecoin that you have a banana curve of buyers. I did this recently with a small beverage brand here in Boulder. Boulder is full of small, healthy beverage brands.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten to work with a few. And they were convinced they have amazingly passionate buyers. They have really loyal buyers because they see it in the data when they look at how many people subscribe to buy their beverages and how many people rave about their limited releases and how much people love their posts on Instagram. All of that is true. But when I asked to look at the actual data of all the buyers on their website, not just the repeat buyers, it turns out that 70% of their buyers had only bought one case ever.
So what's the implication of that though? Like why would anybody care to know? Like, cause you go, oh yeah, I got these heavy buyers, which are, you would call them loyal, or somebody might traditionally call them loyal. But what does it matter that you have these light buyers?
It matters in a couple really important ways. If you think your success as a company is by getting the heavy buyers to stay and or to buy more, you're in for a rough surprise because that's not how the world works. That's like trying to get water to flow uphill. Water doesn't flow that way. And if you knew the science, you'd know how to build irrigation systems for water to flow downhill.
Wait, can we start? Water doesn't go uphill.
No, it's a totally different system. It's called evaporation, Mark. I'll tell you all about it after the podcast. So first of all, you will spend a lot of money and time trying to hold on to these heavy buyers and thinking that they're loyal and believing that everyone is like that and missing out on the fact that maybe 50, 60, or 70% of your buyers only buy you once ever. Mm-hmm. So that's a disaster. And the second thing that's going to be a problem is you're not going to understand how to connect with the 99% of buyers who don't even know your brand exists yet.
Yeah.
Because you're already assuming people know you and love you.
Right.
That's the ticket, I think, right there.
Yeah. Like this insert Harley Davidson tattoo logo here, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah. You think everybody knows you and everybody loves you and everybody thinks about you all the time when it's time to buy something in that world. But I get a lot of kind of awakenings when I talk to clients about their current customers versus their prospects and point out that not only does their distribution of buyers look like a banana and not a bell curve or not a flat line, it's very, very, very heavily weighted with light buyers. But I also point out that 95 to 99 to 99.9% of your future customers in the next 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, probably don't even know your brand exists right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you're Coke.
There's very few brands that could even attempt to say, you know what, I have a really high penetration across all the different audiences. And you're right. Maybe the Cokes. I don't even know what would be a second brand that has that level of consideration, really.
Yeah.
In the world.
It's very few. And you have to constantly remind them you exist. So that's another of the laws that I teach. And usually when I teach this, when I work with teams, and I find it most effective to work with teams so that they all kind of get it at the same time and they're not arguing.
That's a
I
good
work with
point.
teams.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Should we pause for that point to settle in?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, Mark. I have had really great success going from being in the ad land and trying to sell in ideas to going upstream to working with whole teams so that they all see the world in the same way. They're all working from the same assumptions about buyer behavior, all working from the same understanding about these laws. And then they're not fighting with each other internally. And they then have to recruit usually the C-suite, unless they are the C-suite, and recruit the rest of the company. But team-based learning of brand laws is a very effective way to do it. And it's one of the main ways I've had success getting organizations to embrace these.
I naturally, all of it, just having you say that right now, all of a sudden my mind's like, it's going to deviate a little bit from our outline here, but I'm fascinated by this because I think naturally it's always like, how do we get that executive buy-in that will then allow for that permutation that's going to trickle down to the rest of the org? What you're suggesting here is like, no, it's like get those working groups aligned first that can either move the ideas up a lot easier, because then when you've achieved that buy-in at scale, that's likely when you can actually make more impact and more change than if it's just getting a few executives in the room and saying, okay, everyone good here? Now take it down. It feels like it's almost counterintuitive than a lot of us think we should be approaching this.
Don't get me wrong, V. I am all about senior buy-in and support, and nothing tends to work without senior buy-in and support. But on the flip side, the senior leadership has to support it. Yeah, so I do like to work as high up as I can so that the organization does get behind it and does show it's an imperative. But getting a whole team on board means that there's no internal conflict or question about why don't they use the word loyalty and why instead they just focus on churn, and why they understand how to analyze churn within the framework of the double jeopardy law. That's not a debate. Or when it comes to advertising, which is an entire other topic for brand science, there's no debate about why putting a duck on it might be the best thing you can do.
Yeah. Well, actually, why don't you talk about that real quick, if you don't mind, because you've got a really interesting logo. It's a frog with antlers. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
And it's on everything. It's everywhere. Like it.
You're breaking us, man.
The frog with elk antlers, aka the FRELK.
It has a name.
It does. It's not a jackalope. That's a jackrabbit with antelope antlers. This is a frog with elk antlers. And The first reason I have it is because I just made you talk about it, which I love. A logo is a tool, and it can do nothing for you or it can do something for you. And I decided to pull every lever I could to try and gain some memorability and some advantage as a very small brand. And having a logo that's interesting and quirky and delightful is a way to strengthen my brand. And why the FRELK itself? Why a frog with elk antlers? Well, frogs and antlers are natural, just like brand laws. But a frog with antlers is magical. And that's a lever I can pull.
Okay.
I like it.
I absolutely love that.
I give away a lot of FRELK stickers, even in
bet.
B2B meetings.
Yeah. I would put one on my Mac.
Yeah.
I'll consider it in the mail, V.
Amazing.
V, I don't know if you had any thoughts about the team learning thing. I don't know. I just didn't want to leave you or get you off that if you want to go back to it.
No. For me, the reason why I think it resonated with me is because and Mark, if we go back to our shared experience, when we worked at SportCheck there, the moment that you were able to get the buyers, the marketers all in the same room to kind of help, either move a strategy along, the moment that there was that shared accountability, it changed in which the velocity that you could operate in work.
Yeah.
And when I heard Ethan, you're kind of coming to us with that, say like, the moment I can get teams on board, that's where it is. And that's where my mind's like, oh yeah, I remember that personally. But I think the hardest thing though is still, well, it may be once you have that moment where everyone's like on the same page, it's great. Making sure you're bringing everyone along for the ride is probably the hardest thing to do because there's so many different opinions. We were talking about earlier, some of those things that are just innately in the back of our heads that we will just throw and use to either counter. The only thing I would love to, if I can just take your take on just quickly on that, is how have you been able to navigate even those nuances when you have various groups? Because I'm assuming it's not just a marketing group that you're probably bringing in. You're probably bringing in different groups from the organization as well.
Yeah, I have worked with the marketing team. I've worked with the C-suite. I've worked with, if it's a small company, the whole company.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it does vary. What I have found is, first of all, I need, again, to give people a visceral, personal experience of this stuff so that it's not abstract. It's not about buyers or shoppers out there somewhere. It's not about ads out there somewhere. I talk about you and your butt and your toilet paper. And of course your jeans, because everyone talks about Levi's as a perfect, iconic, loyalist brand. And it's great to pull the wool off their eyes about that. Mm-hmm. But after we can have that visceral, personal understanding about these laws, and I can help shift people's intuition as a team, what I tend to see, I call it the 4 stages of grief, right? Stage 1 is resistance of brand grief. Forget brand loyalty. We're talking about brand grief now. Stage 1 of brand grief is resistance. Yeah. Well, not in my category. Well, not my brand. Well, I mean, but look at Harley, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then when people start to really see the data, they hit despair. And they go, oh, and then they believe that everything is just completely predetermined and fated, and it's all driven by these laws, and therefore there's no creativity, and therefore there's no individual expression, and it's despairing.
Yeah.
Then when they come further along the journey to see what the laws really do mean for things like creativity, and what the laws really do mean for things like logos, or how brands compete, or whether brands own a customer type, there's an awakening. There's that aha. Just like we heard today on our talk, when you have that aha that, oh, wow, 99% of my future buyers have never heard of my brand at all.
Yeah.
Wow. Or if you're a big brand and fairly well known, like let's say Nivea or Dove, 70% of my future buyers haven't really heard of my brand at all because they're still too young. But they're going to buy me when they're 30 and 40 and 50. So still 70% of my future buyers have never heard of me at all. That's a big awakening. Wow. I'm worried about this little log pile of current customers and how I'm going to stoke my fire with this little log pile of current customers and how I'm going to nurture that log pile when behind me is a whole frickin' forest.
Yeah. And
I've had teams literally have that sense in a room where we almost acted out. There's the little campfire of your brand and the little log pile of current customers that you want to nurture because loyalty matters.
Yeah.
And behind you is a whole forest. And then the awakening leads to excitement.
Yeah.
Because you realize you no longer have to believe that water flows uphill and fight for water flowing uphill and be disappointed when your toilet paper buyer keeps switching to the competitor all the time. Right? Because as it turns out, they're not switching. There's actually a law of behavior called the repertoire buying law.
Yeah.
And people buy 2 or 3 brands and they're happy with them, or 1 or 2 brands and they're happy with them. But there's an excitement that comes from finally having clarity about how the world really works and how marketing really works and how ads really work. And that's when the fun definitely begins for them. I had fun the whole time. I love watching people go through resistance and despair.
Yeah, no doubt. So you've taken these laws that you've converted them, I think, as part of your model into a laws and levers framework. Can you just explain a little bit about that and how it works?
Yes. The laws are things that tend to be universal. Okay. That tend to be empirical patterns, observable patterns. Over and over, you see the same thing like double jeopardy. Right. Where big brands have more customers and they have slightly higher repeat rates. Those are laws, and we all need to grapple with those and come to grips with those and appreciate them for what they are. Then you've got levers, which are things you could pull and might work and might not work and might work sometimes and not some other times. And those are the things that a lot of people confuse with laws, or they discount and don't believe they can work for them at all. Here's an example of levers. For a while, we've heard that brand purpose is a law, that every brand needs to have a purpose higher than just doing its function, wiping your butt or covering your feet. And it turns out that brand purpose is not a law. My mayonnaise does not need a brand purpose. But brand purpose can be a tremendous lever if you're a brand like Ben & Jerry's or Patagonia or Newman's Own.
Yeah.
Right? And if you pull the lever right, it can be a tremendous advantage for you over other brands. And it can help. But there's often no guarantee it's going to work. And sometimes, sadly, there's no guarantee it'll work twice in a row. Another great example of a brand lever is a mascot or a character. Michelin has the Michelin Man. Geico has famously and tremendously used the Geico Gecko as a mascot. In B2B, Salesforce has now a whole cast of characters.
So
Astro is their main. And a mascot can be a tremendous lever for you, but it doesn't have to be. So levers are things which can be creative, which can be cultural, which can be functional and business oriented. Like one lever might be an exclusive distribution. And so Coke and Pepsi have exclusives with all the restaurants in the world. And so they fight over those. They duke that out. And that's a great lever. But levers are really maddening and annoying because A, people confuse them with laws like purpose or mascots. And B, the data rarely tell you which lever to pull. Yeah. So all those oodles of data scientists that we were talking about earlier, digging through the data and trying to find out what makes you buy more toilet paper or what makes you prefer Charmin versus Cottonelle or Quilted Northern. The data won't necessarily tell them which levers to pull. Should they do a partnership with Taylor Swift? Should they do a tie-in with Major League Soccer? Should they jack their prices up and do exclusive seasonal wrapping paper? So levers are hard. but levers are important because those are the ways you find for your brand to have advantages that other brands might not necessarily have.
It almost feels like the levers become the creative execution that could affect all the different, not just the marketing side, being creative with pricing, being creative with distribution, being creative with all that. I feel like when we start maybe reframing what a lever actually is, I think when you go back to, the awakening and the excitement they were talking about earlier, I think it will force professionals in their specific expertise to really start rethinking what those opportunities look like when you look at it through that lens of creativity.
Yes, I love that moment. You're right. After the awakening, when people say, I wonder if we should open our own stores and consider vertical integration.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, that's a lever that's worked really, really well for some brands, Apple. And yet it works really, really differently for other brands. Yeah. So the awakening to realize you not just can try more levers, but you should try more levers is one of the freeing experiences that I've seen people have when they go through the laws and levers approach to marketing.
I also, just to build on what you're saying, V, I also feel like aside from the creativity component, it also gives a bit of prioritization because as you were saying that, maybe this is intentional or not, but my head went, okay, you said law and lever, not lever and law or lever and law. Lever, lever, potato. But also I was thinking is if you have a finite number of resources like everyone does, including Coke, I would then start to think about, okay, well, let's look at the laws first and see what we're doing there and apply resources accordingly. If I have leftover resources, then I may take the lever approach because they're less certain outcomes.
I tend to see them working in tandem, in parallel, at the exact same time, in the sense that if you want to increase your penetration, which is a law-based approach to growth, as opposed to increase your, quote, loyalty,
right,
which is a fantasy-based approach to growth, then how do you increase your penetration? By acquiring new customers and finding new audiences. Well, finding new audiences can be done in many, many, many different ways.
Yeah.
So you're using the law, which is I want to acquire new customers, but you need to start pulling different levers to figure out how to acquire those new customers.
Right.
I'm always shocked, for instance, that Restoration Hardware, one of the biggest, healthiest furniture brands in America, does not have social media. They are not on any social media. They are running the Sears Roebuck playbook from 1884. They are sending out 1,000 pages of catalog a year. Now, back in the day with the Sears Roebuck catalog and people didn't have a lot of toilet paper, they'd use the Sears catalog for their toilet paper in the outhouse. Sure. So here we are, full circle, back to toilet paper. But I don't think anyone's using, I don't think anyone today is using the Restoration Hardware catalogs for toilet paper. Nonetheless,
definitely not 3-ply.
No, it's not, it is not. It is not. Extra glossy toilet paper. But it's fascinating because Restoration Hardware is killing it, and they're killing it without any TikTok or Instagram or Pinterest, which everyone thinks, oh, well, you have to be on them right now. That's a law. Yeah. You have to be where the kids are. You have to be in the new media and the socials. No, apparently that's a lever or a lever if you're north of the border. Yeah. Then you can pull different levers, and they chose to pull the catalog lever, the direct mail lever, and they're crushing it.
Yeah,
this may sound, I don't know, maybe I'm getting old, but I'm going to say this. When I was younger, I'm going to use my air quotes here, I was 100% digital first everything, right? I was all for kill the flyers, kill anything that comes to my mail. I don't read it, whatever. Yeah. It's funny now, though, that I will actually, before I throw things out, I will have a quick look, right? Yeah. Because I feel like I've been over digitified that I don't want to look at my phone any more than I have to. So if I have to look at a flyer to do a quick scan, hey, this is of interest, this isn't of interest, it kind of works. And if we go back to what you were saying earlier, Ethan, like maybe the way they're targeting is like, I'm going to target that 70% that's coming. And when they come around, when they actually need me, I'm going to be there in the medium that they will be using, which makes sense at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I don't need the TikToker right now.
No. And again, a lot of people who are on TikTok also read things on paper.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be lots of variability within those segments, as opposed to believing that they're starkly different, like millennials versus boomers. I also like to say that if paper came after computers, we would think it's a superior technology.
Probably,
look at it. It doesn't use batteries.
Probably.
Yeah.
You can read it in any light. It's easy on the eyes. You can rip things out and put them on the wall. All look at the same time. You can write on it. You can fold it up. You can use it as toilet paper and as pinch. But yeah, I think we've gotten we're again creatures of habit and creatures of fad. And so we chase the fad, whether it's brand purpose or digital. And we forget that there's something really lovely about getting a business card that's made of nice paper. So I still hand out business cards because there's a tactile, visceral experience that people get. And then, of course, we have a big argument about whether I should just, hold up a QR code that goes to my LinkedIn page.
Sure.
But that's fun because then they go home and that business card floats around in their bag for a little while.
Yeah, I got a few on my desk that I got to do something with.
Yeah.
I had a couple of takeaways here. One is the team learning environment, which I think is a big aha for me. One was I'm going back to something you said, academicalized. I think it was the word you used. That was a good one. And then V had a killer, digimified. I think you was.
So, those are very technical terms. Too.
Very, yeah. But what kind of practical takeaways do you think people? That was a segue. What kind of practical takeaways would you offer to people regularly? Like, where do you start with learning this stuff?
Well, what I think has been neat about our conversation here is, yes, it's been about the laws and to some extent the levers, but it's been about how people resist the laws or how people struggle with the laws or how the laws fight against long-held beliefs. And so being someone who helps people learn and apply the laws of brand science, I've learned how to get them to go through those 4 stages of brand grief. And coming out the other side, a few of those very practical tips from the academical things. One is that your first fight is against forgetting. Ooh. The first fight for any brand is against forgetting because brains are full of other stuff. I've got old song lyrics and new doctor's appointments in my head, and I have to exercise and figure out how to shovel the snow off the back deck and, of course, find my car keys. So, number one, anything you can do to be anti-forgettable will help you to be more interesting, to be more obvious, to be more strongly color branded, anything like that. That's one step, which is why, yes, you see a whole lot of orange and white when it comes to applied brand science, and the FRELK is everywhere. Mm-hmm. Number 2.
Long live the FRELK.
Long live the FRELK. FRELK, yeah, baby. Number 2, going back to the double jeopardy law, focus mostly on customer acquisition. Don't waste tons of money on loyalty or even on cross-selling. Because, again, the more customers you acquire, overall, the higher the repeat purchase rate or lower churn or other indicators of loyalty that you'll see.
There it comes up again. Yeah.
But if you want to grow, the route is through customer acquisition.
Yeah.
The third thing I'd recommend is always be trying some new marketing levers. Always save a little money, not a lot, just a little bit, and sometimes not even any money, but trying new things because you're never sure what's going to really give you an advantage or what's going to help. And usually the range of things that will work is much, much broader than the range of things you're trying today. And you have self-limited your opportunities because you think, oh, that won't work. We're a serious brand. We can't put a duck on anything. Oh no, we're a retail brand. We have no business being in entertainment, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So always be trying some new marketing levers and see where else you can gain an advantage.
Those are awesome. I'm so fiercely trying to catch my hand up to the notes here.
I hope this is recorded.
4 pages of notes.
Yeah.
We should have recorded it, gents.
See, paper is useful.
There you go.
Old school here, man.
Yeah, this is great.
So how can people find out more about you, a lot of the great work that you're doing? Just kind of stay close to the FRELK. Is the FRELK going to have a friend, a companion? Like, I'd love to know all about that.
The FRELK is soon to have its own Nickelodeon show on
there it is.
Marketing and branding for children.
Got to start them young. I'm with you.
That's right. That's right. Forget about selling them stuff. I want them to be advertisers by the age of 8. You can find me pretty easily if you just do a search on Ethan Decker or Applied Brand Science. The only real competition I have is with a guy who plays soccer, but I'm happy to be confused with him because he's handsome. He's more handsome than me. You can also find things on appliedbrandscience.com. And I'm most active these days on LinkedIn. So you can read a lot of the posts and find a lot of the graphs and charts that Marc referenced today up on LinkedIn, and also look at the conversation people have about those, because that's also really fascinating.
Yeah, awesome. I'll definitely put a couple of notes and links into the show notes as well. But yeah, this is awesome. Thanks, Ethan.
Absolutely.
If you like this show, please leave a review. And even if you didn't, we'd love to make this show better, and your feedback will help us do that.
Καλώς ορίσατε για το post-pod.
That's even better than I thought it was going to be. That's awesome. That's Greek, right?
That was.
Oh, it's so good.
Can you do one? Go ahead.
Can you do one where you put the sleeping barber in the as English in the thing?
Καλώς ορίσατε στο post-pod up to sleeping barber.
It's amazing.
And the thing is, I have the dialect, like the Greek English dialect, so I can kind of go back and forth.
You've got an English accent in Greek.
So sleeping barber
is
like how you would say sleeping barber in Greek, in Gringlish, maybe. Anyways,
I remember a long time ago I was dating this girl, and her family's Portuguese, and they would say a bunch of Portuguese stuff, and then they go "Parque de carro," and so
park the car.
Yeah. You'd think it was like Portuguese, but it's just park the car.
It's just park the car.
Parque de carro.
There's so many of those in our language as well. That's pretty funny.
So speaking of funny things in our language, how about loyalty in Ethan?
That was what a fantastic conversation. And yes, loyalty keeps rearing its head in those most, I don't want to call them inopportune moments, but it's still just there. It's part of our vernacular, thinking that's what our sole purpose of being a marketer is to drive loyalty. And I'm just so thankful Ethan came on the show to, start that process of righting that ship a little bit.
Yeah. And I think, starting with the idea of loyalty, it's really powerful because, we all say it, we all talk about it. And it's one of those things where we're like, okay, yeah, we're going to get a customer and then they're going to be loyal to us. Meaning they're going to be monogamous. They're going to buy from us all the time. They're the most the greatest customer because they always come to us. They tell all their friends, all those kinds of things that we conjure up in our heads. about what loyalty means. And it turns out that none of those things are actually probably true.
No. There's less and less evidence to say so that, people are really monogamous to one specific brand. I think it was one line where he says, if they're a heavy buyer in your product, they're likely a heavy buyer in the category.
Yeah.
And that for me was a huge ding, 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 ding.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we used the example of mayonnaise, for example, or even toilet paper came up quite frequently during our episode, which was kind of funny in its own right. But I think it just goes to show you that our buying behaviors don't mimic what we've been taught in marketing to say. If someone has repeat purchases with you, it means that they love you.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. They love a lot of brands.
Yeah. But the thing I appreciate about the toilet paper example is that it is something that's a common experience for everybody.
Yeah.
I've tried to talk about some of the laws to other people in the past. And for me, and this is where I think toilet paper is helpful. Because for me, I would talk about things like grocery. I shop for groceries all the time.
We know you love going grocery shopping.
I do. I'm the cook in the family, so I'm always shopping for groceries. But I go to Co-op most often. I rarely go to Safeway, but I do go there when I'm on my way home from dropping off my daughter at dance. I also there's a store called Lena's, and they're Italian.
Great place.
Yeah, great. And I mean, they've got all the stuff for pizza. So whenever we're going to make pizza, I go there.
Yeah.
I go to this other shop that's Blush Lane that you know about in Marta Loop, and because I often go there out of convenience, but because they have the hummus that I love the most, and so you know what I mean. I got 4 or 5 different places that I go to in my repertoire. There's a Greek place around the corner from me that I go to get that's near my guitar lessons. So I talk about that with people and trying to explain the laws of brand science. And then they're like, "Oh no, I just go to the Safeway near my house." Yeah. Because they're in an isolated area where there's not a lot of other options, and that's the one option there.
Yeah.
So I get the point of using toilet paper because it's something that everybody's experienced. You go to the aisle, there's a whole bunch of different kinds. There's one that's got, it was always on sale. And so,
you know what I mean? The one you're picking up.
Yeah. And then that triggers a lot of purchase behavior as well. And so, it's funny because it is common, and it does make you rethink what loyalty actually is, because you then see it for yourself.
I would argue another one of those where is milk, right?
Yeah.
I think between, if you're a big fan of say 2% milk, doesn't matter if it's from Beatrice or Lucerne or you just need 2% milk. For at least maybe in our household, we don't really think about what brand it is or anything to that effect. So I feel it just becomes one of those things. It's I need milk. Who's got it right now? Where am I?
Yeah.
I just need to pick up milk.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think, it's a really good point. And then the other one, though, I would say is where you get hung up and people are, "Oh, I'm loyal." And they're like, I always drive Hondas. I'm like, well, yeah, because you own a Honda. You're not swapping that out every, maybe some people are, but you're not swapping that out every 3 months or whatever.
Totally.
In those scenarios. And so I think that's where the differentiation between the two types of markets helps, because you can go, what is that? Sorry, listener. I just put my hand up, and all of a sudden there's some kind of AI thing happening on my screen, and balloons just showed. That's weird. I don't know what I did. Anyway, the AI is really liking my story here. But then you get to this point where subscription markets are one thing, and loyalty is loyalty.
Yep.
Defection is really low. So a car would be a subscription kind of market, or a B2B SaaS product is a subscription market. Yeah. But that's low in a moment of time, but it would follow the same patterns over time.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. I just want like the buying circumstance for a lot of different products may give you the illusion of loyalty. So
Yeah.
we talked about a car. You're always going to buy a Honda because you've just bought a Honda, but you're buying a vehicle every 7 years.
Yeah.
I don't know like what the average is, but that's a lot easier maybe to be loyal to something specific. Whereas things like commodities or things like on repeat purchase, there's less loyalty there because you just become a heavy category buyer, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where you have to really kind of take a step back and understand, okay, where does my product or my service fall under? Even like Ethan talked about, like doing some basic frequency modeling, right? Just understand, like, what do those repeat purchases look like against what he called it, the banana curve. I never heard that before, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But having that understanding, like, well, how many times your product is being purchased? 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and then obviously moving up that continuum there. So it will give you a better sense of what happened.
Well, I'm going to try something we've never done before. I don't think we've ever done it.
I don't know.
I want to show you my entire screen here. Look at this.
Well, for those listening right now, we have an image on our screen while we're talking to it.
But we have this on YouTube too, so this may be.
That's right.
Yeah. Look at that. Oh my gosh. This is a whole new world, V.
How about you explain this to those that just are listening to us?
Yeah, so the banana curve, it looks like a long tail curve. You have a few. It depends on what you're classifying here, but a few of the price points or a few of the customers or whatever that has a lot of volume.
Yeah,
and so then it trails off in a nice long tail.
Yeah,
yeah. So that's what he was talking about with the banana curve.
Totally. And I think, again, it's I think we just have to be very very open to the idea that we're not just the consumer. Again, we talked about this numerous times, is not just monogamous, but you just try to make sure that you are just wait, let me try to find his words. Essentially, you don't want to lose. You want to, first fight it against forgetting or becoming anti-forgettable, right?
Yeah.
Because he listed at the end of the like 3 things at the end of the podcast, but like that's why you need to make sure that you're constantly advertising. He brought up Coke as an example. They don't stop advertising because there's still a lot of the population that they're coming in and they still don't know about Coke.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe Coke's an anomaly a little bit, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Well, but even Coke, though, like, think about all the buying situations that Coke could come up in. And then Coke, that part of their challenge would be to make sure they come up in more of those situations.
Yeah.
Like, so it's not that everyone knows Coke is one thing, but that everyone thinks of Coke in a specific buying situation is a whole other thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to touch on that I really liked is the stages of brand grief that he highlighted.
Yeah, that was great.
Which I thought was really, really, really well done. Stage 1 is resistance. Well, this doesn't happen in my category. This doesn't happen in our industry. We're B2B.
Yeah.
We're this is not us. It's everyone else. But then when the realization sets in, then that's where despair starts becoming a part of the process. It's like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
It is us.
Yeah.
But then there's an awakening that happens subsequently, and then finally the excitement of recreating and doing things truly magical. So I think it was interesting when you go through that, and I think both you and I have been in those settings where there is this realization, this moment of clarity that happens. You're like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
We've been thinking about this all wrong.
Totally.
So I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah. Well, and he made a quick point about it. I think one of the things that people resist about these ideas of laws of brand growth is that like for a creative group of people, creative industry, you get to this point where you hear things like laws and you go, well, that takes all the fun out of it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm super creative. I was the one who, was able to generate this thing out of nothing. And so,
Right. Right.
in a way that becomes threatening to say, well, you can codify all this stuff. And it's not to say that we're with the laws that you codify the creativity. You just are more codifying the consumer behavior so that the creativity could be more specific and even potentially more, well, for sure, more effective.
Yeah.
Because you're targeting the right kinds of things and the right kinds of behavior and the right kinds of people.
Totally.
You know what? Actually, speaking of which, like the idea of segmentation, if you often because of the idea of loyalty, we target our most loyal customers a lot.
Yeah.
Right? We will find more people like that. And those people are the heavy category buyers. But then, and so because of that, you build all your creative around that, and you tie all your media investments to that.
Yeah.
But in order to grow, you got to reach more of the infrequent buyers or non-buyers.
Yeah.
Which you alienate by focusing your creative on the heavy buyers all the time.
Well, the reason why is because when you look at it, say let's use digital as an example, the moment that your costs or your CPA, your cost per acquisition starts creeping up, you're starting to think, oh, it's not the right audience. It's not as efficient. We're wasting money. It's why people like to sit on their branded keywords versus investing in generic, because again, costs go up and everyone is really trying to say, from a digital perspective, we have to be driving as much efficiency as possible.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we've been pushed down this weird path of efficiency, or the guise of efficiency, where we're losing the plot and saying, if you want to build in longevity, you want to make sure you're speaking to, I think you used the percentage, 74% of those that don't know your brand, you have to be willing to invest more money. And usually when it's finite, people don't go there. So they go back to the lookalike audiences based off of their first party data, which means it's heavy buyers in the specific category. You have high frequency on those media buys, and you're giving yourself self high fives because you think you're doing great because you're trying short-term growth. But at the end of the day, maybe it's not the right thing to do.
There was, I shared that Perpetual Traffic podcast link with you the other day, and I was listening to it on the way home. I was like, oh, and it's exactly what you're talking about. They're like, okay, well, and this is from performance marketers, which I think is actually maybe a sign of
things are changing,
of the apocalypse. But but they're like, well, if we did everything the way that Google said on this one case study, our ROAS looks amazing. And so the podcast is why ROAS sucks. And so, and so they did all the things that you just described, and the ROAS was huge.
Great.
But the sales in the bank account were terrible.
Yeah.
They flipped it all to do reach-based tactics to drive, they did some really smart things with targeting or surfacing products that were high-value products and that kind of stuff, but to new audiences.
Yeah.
Basically using reach. And then all of a sudden, ROAS is terrible, according to Google, but real sales were massive.
Went up.
Yeah. So it's really interesting kind of hearing that coming from performance, quote unquote, marketers. It's changing everything. Like a lot of this stuff is like you would never have heard that, 5 years ago from performance marketers.
No, because I think we, and I'm putting myself in that category, is like, I think we felt closest to the data that also showed us we were on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's happened though over the last few years is you're seeing almost this awakening. So you want to call it the stages of brand grief.
Yeah.
So I think there's awakening on our side. Wait a second. There's almost seems like all these new technologies that are coming out. You talk about PMAX, you talk about, value-based bidding and all these things. That exercise essentially becomes a redistribution of attribution versus it being incrementality.
Right.
Right. And I think that is the moment that we're like, whoa, time out here. We have to be going in a different direction. And, at the end of the day, even Ethan brought it to our attention. Well, he said, like, as marketers, we have to make sure that we're trying new levers.
Yeah.
Or levers. Depends where you are. more levers, right? So you just never know what might work. So that example that you brought up I think is a great example. It's like, as marketers, we have to make sure that we don't just sit on what we believe is truth, is continuously test and moving that needle in areas that maybe we were uncomfortable at the beginning.
Yeah. I thought that was a really interesting point about, or an epiphany for me. Well, two things. One on teaching teams was really interesting as a way to get this stuff to be absorbed by a group of people. But the other one was around, I just lost the train of thought. The lever, trying new things. I totally lost the train of thought.
Academicization, or what was that? The ability to speak academia.
Yeah. Well, translating stuff into regular language, I think matters. I totally lost the train of thought. It was such a great point, V. Whatever.
Well, we'll
It'll come to me later.
It may, because I think the other thing for me that was a big aha moment, and it's not the first time we've heard it, which also I loved, is the sense that we should be focusing our attention mostly on the mass reach side from an acquisition perspective, and less on trying to find like that one behavior that is consistent amongst the largest audience sizes, right? It's like, just go for reach. Don't try to be too targeted in some of this. And I think that for me is a big takeaway, and something that I will definitely be looking to adopt a lot more in the way I approach media. So
reach matters a lot, like more than anything we ever really gave it credit for. Oh, that was the thing I was going to say. Like and then your point brought because I was thinking about all the data we're looking at. It's just our own data. And so when you're looking at your own data, it's like incrementality we were talking about. Like, you look at ROAS and go, oh, this is amazing. But it's not incremental. And so in the same way that you're looking at your own data on loyalty, you go, oh, we got these loyal customers. But it's not your own customers. They're customers of the category. And so I think that's one of the things that, if for marketers as a takeaway, even salespeople, I think, intuitively know this. If you try and sell this to the same group of people over and over and over and over again, you're going to suffer.
Yeah.
Because they already bought, and they're going to buy again at some point in the future, but not now. So you actually have to reach more new people. And so, when you look at your own data, especially if you've got a big data set and you've got lots of customers, hundreds of thousands of customers, it seems great. You just go after the group that has the biggest, your Pareto law or whatever, which actually turns out is probably more like 60-40. So the 40% of your customers who aren't purchasing a lot, the long tail component of that, there's a huge group of them that are just buying ones and twos. And it probably makes up about 40% of your sales. So like, you can't ignore them either.
I think I'd brought this up in another example, so forgive me if you've heard this before, but we had a similar issue when I was working for WestJet. Like, we were targeting the premium traveler.
Yeah.
That had essentially, they spent the most money with us.
Right.
However, the largest loyal user base was actually our teals that they only flew once or twice a year.
Right.
So like, while as an airline, you've really started going down this path of the premiumization of the brand, the premiumization of the cabins, etc. It's really speaking to a small subset of your consumers when you're, I don't want to say you're neglecting, but you're not targeting the leisure traveler that is really going to jump on a flight once or twice a year.
Yeah.
And they make up the largest part of your database.
Yeah.
But they were never a point of focus from a targeting perspective.
Yeah. It's a bit of a mind fuck. Like,
it is.
You got to wrap your head around that, because it's so counter to what we've all been programmed to do.
Totally. You want to go where the average basket size is largest. So that means there's, someone that's buying heavy against your products. It's like, oh my gosh, they must really love what we sell or what we do or whatever it is. We want more of those people.
Yeah.
When actuality, you're if you were to look at, where some of your sales are coming from, it's those that are buying maybe lighter on the one side, but they make up more of your total sales volume.
Yeah.
So how do you appeal to a larger audience versus the unique audience that is buying a lot, which again signals that they're probably a heavy category buyer, not just your own product.
Yeah.
That's for me is one of the biggest takeaways.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was great. I really enjoyed that conversation with him, and I like how it kind of turns all the laws of brand science stuff into regular language. If you know what I mean, it's not.
That's a great point.
Yeah, he did get into like the NBD law, but yeah, negative binomial distribution. But you lose people as soon as you start getting into that, right? Yeah.
Come on, marketing still has to be fun, man. Let's go.
Like the banana curve. I appreciate that. And I think he said Weimer Snyder's. I forget how to pronounce his name. Anyway, also a good book. Eat your greens.
Mm-hmm. Eat those greens.
Okay. V. How about you? Awesome. How about you bring home a little Greek flourish?
More Greek?
Yeah.
Now you put me on the spot. What can I do? Ευχαριστούμε που ακούσατε άλλη μια εκπομπή από το Sleeping Barber. Θα τα πούμε την επόμενη φορά.
I love it. It is so good. I wish I could speak Greek. It sounds so good.
That's awesome, man.
All right.
Well, till next time, what are we doing?
We're going to chase that profitability, V.
That's all we do, man.
That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
That's it. There you go.
All right, buddy. Talk to you soon.
Have a great day. Okay.